Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Always great to be back.
Today we're diving into a story that's really shaking up the Pokemon world. International incidents, arrests. It even brings up questions about Pokemon care. If any of you listening have suggestions for a future deep dive, let us know down in the comments. We're always looking for more rabbit holes to explore.
Well, this is definitely a deep one. What's really fascinating is how quickly this whole licensing thing turned into a global debate, It's about Pokemon care standards, sure, but also cultural differences, even international relations.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot to unpack. So the story centers around Professor Oak, a legend in Pokemon research, as I'm sure you all know. And he was recently arrested in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for allegedly practicing medicine without a license.
And the Malaysian authorities are not messing around. The charges against him fall under their Private Healthcare Facilities and Services Act of 1998. It's all about ensuring public safety, making sure anyone practicing medicine in Malaysia is qualified and has the correct license.
Right, so they're serious about regulating healthcare. And that includes Pokemon care, too. We've got reports from the BBC and Burma News. They describe this pop-up clinic Oak was running. Witnesses say he was giving medical advice, treating Pokemon, even dispensing medication.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It seems like some trainers who went to Oak's clinic, they weren't even aware he might not have been licensed to practice in Malaysia. Burma News quotes this one trainer, Akmal Rahman, and now he's worried about whether the treatment his Pokemon got was even safe.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just about the law, right? It's also about transparency and informed consent.
Exactly. And this whole thing has really touched a nerve in Malaysia, especially among veterinary professionals. Dr. Zahira Mahmood. She is a veterinarian specializing in Pokemon care. And Burma News quotes her saying that Pokemon medicine, just like any other medical field, requires serious training and following the regulations.
So Oak's actions have really sparked a debate about professional standards and patient safety in the Malaysian Pokemon care community.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not just a local issue anymore. The international Pokemon community is watching too. The International Pokemon Research Association, or IPRA. That's the global body representing Pokemon researchers, by the way. They put out a statement, reported by CBC News, expressing concern over Oak's arrest.
I read that statement. It seemed like they were trying to walk a fine line. They acknowledged that the charges are serious, but also highlighted Oak's career. All his achievements in Pokemon research and education, not saying he did nothing wrong, but trying to provide context.
Right, and they're not just talking. CBC News reports that IPRA is sending a delegation to Malaysia to offer Oak legal and diplomatic support. That shows you how seriously the global research community is taking this.
And it's not just IPRA. Other big names like Professor Elm and Professor Kukui have spoken out in support of Oak. And there's even a petition demanding his release. It's gotten over 500,000 signatures.
Really shows the respect and admiration Oak has in the research world. But there's tension here, right? You've got this global nature of Pokemon research, but then you have the specific laws and regulations of each country.
So how did this go from a debate about licensing to a full-blown international incident?
Well, things escalated when Ash Ketchum, the Ash Ketchum, the world-famous Pokemon trainer, along with Serena and Clement, were arrested in Putrajaya.
Wait, Ash Ketchum is involved. What happened?
According to CNA News, they were protesting outside the Jabatan Perkhidmatan Veterinar Malaysia, or JPVM. That's the agency responsible for regulating all veterinary practices in Malaysia, including Pokemon care, of course. They were demanding Oak's release, but things didn't exactly go according to plan.
Oh boy, I have a feeling I know where this is going. Clement's inventions, right?
You know it. They started with signs and slogans, all peaceful, but then Clement's mega protest amplifier malfunctioned. It exploded and caused a huge commotion, startled people and Pokemon.
So a peaceful protest turned chaotic?
Exactly. Apparently, some Pokemon battles even broke out, which didn't help. The JPVM office had to be temporarily closed. Sounds a bit like one of Ash's adventures, honestly, but this time there are real consequences.
Yeah, no kidding. CNA News quotes the Putrajaya District Police Chief, ACP Mold Saleh. He said the police had no choice but to step in, restore order. The arrests were necessary for public safety.
And the charges against Ash, Serena, and Clement are pretty serious. They could be facing violations of the Peaceful Assembly Act of 2012 and the Public Order Ordinance. If they're convicted, they could be fined or even deported.
Wow, so Ash trying to help his mentor really backfired.
Seems that way. The JPVM Director General, Dr. Azlina Rashid, even made a public statement. condemning the disruption caused by the protest, and stressing the importance of respecting legal channels for dissent.
So before we get into what happened after Ash's protest, I think it's important to understand how Malaysians are reacting to all of this.
You're right. This has sparked a lot of debate within Malaysia. Many people, including legal experts and civic groups, are urging the authorities to stand firm, even with all the international pressure. They're arguing that bending the rules for someone like Professor Oak, regardless of his reputation, would set a dangerous precedent.
They're saying no one is above the law, not even a famous Pokemon professor.
That's the message, loud and clear. CNA News quotes a top Malaysian lawyer, Tan Sri Ibrahim Ahmad. He argues that letting public figures get away with breaking the rules, just because they're famous, would undermine the whole legal system, and that could have serious consequences for the country.
It sounds like upholding the law is a top priority for many Malaysians.
Absolutely. And there are concerns about IPRA's involvement, too. While they're trying to help Oak, some people see their actions as trying to influence the Malaysian legal process.
Interesting how this case has become about more than just Professor Oak. It's about national sovereignty and international influence.
It really is. And social media is buzzing. The hashtag Justice for Pokemon Care is trending in Malaysia, showing widespread support for the police and the legal system.
So many Malaysians are passionate about protecting their legal system and ensuring everyone is treated equally under the law.
Right, and the Royal Malaysia Police have been very clear. They're committed to a thorough and impartial investigation. ACP Farid Abdul Hamid, quoted in CNA News, said it plainly. No one is above the law in Malaysia, no matter how famous or influential.
Okay, so we've got Professor Oak in legal trouble, Ash Ketchum caught up in a protest gone wrong, and a nation grappling with questions of law, sovereignty, and international pressure.
That's a lot. But thankfully, the JPVM finally released an official statement, which helped shed light on some of the legal details of this case.
The JPVM, the agency that regulates Pokemon care, made a statement. What does it say?
Well, the statement was released on January 10th, 2025, and it very clearly confirms that Professor Oak is not a licensed veterinarian in Malaysia. And here's where the details get interesting.
Get on me.
The JPVM specifically says Oak does not have the required veterinarian Pokemon class license.
Veterinarian Pokemon class. That's pretty specific. What does that even mean?
That's a great question. And it tells us something really interesting about how Malaysia approaches Pokemon care.
Okay, I'm listening.
So the fact that there's a separate veterinarian Pokemon class license means Malaysia has a specialized system for regulating Pokemon care separate from normal veterinary practices. It shows a level of sophistication, recognition that Pokemon medicine is its own distinct field with its own requirements.
So it's not just that Oak doesn't have a general veterinary license. He specifically doesn't have the credentials to treat Pokemon in Malaysia.
Precisely.
This raises another question then. What are those specific requirements? And how are they different from traditional veterinary practices?
And that's where the JPVM statement provides some clarity. They emphasize that anyone providing veterinary care for Pokemon in Malaysia must be licensed under the Veterinary Surgeons Act of 1974. And importantly, the Pokemon care regulations that came into effect in 2019.
So Malaysia has specific laws for Pokemon care. And they're relatively new, too. Looks like they recognize the need for separate rules for Pokemon medicine.
Exactly. And this isn't just a formality. The JPVM statement makes it clear that they're committed to enforcing these regulations to maintain high standards of Pokemon care in Malaysia. They even advise trainers and researchers to only use services from registered professionals.
They're sending a clear message. If you want to treat Pokemon in Malaysia, you have to follow their rules.
Absolutely. And the statement outlines the potential consequences for international practitioners who don't comply.
What happens if someone like Oak practices without the right license?
The consequences can be serious. Fines, imprisonment, even deportation.
Wow, Malaysia's serious about this. They're not messing around when it comes to protecting Pokemon.
It seems that way. They're welcoming international researchers and trainers, yes, but they expect everyone to respect and follow their laws.
This is a complicated situation. Legal aspects, international implications, ethical considerations of Pokemon care. Where do we even start?
It's a lot. We've only just scratched the surface. But before we dive in deeper, maybe we should step back and consider what all of this means for the world of Pokemon.
Okay, let's look at the bigger picture. What are the broader implications of this whole Oak situation?
Well, one thing it exposes is this growing trend, the globalization of specialized fields like Pokemon care, and the need to harmonize standards and practices across borders.
Hold on. Harmonization of standards. What does that actually mean?
Imagine a world with one set of rules for Pokemon care, a universal license, valid everywhere. That's harmonization of standards. Countries coming together, agreeing on common principles and qualifications for anyone working with Pokemon anywhere in the world.
So instead of different laws in each country, there'd be a unified system.
Exactly. At least that's the ideal. In this case, messy as it is, might actually be what gets that conversation started.
So Professor Oak's arrest, even if unintentional, could lead to a major shift in how we regulate Pokemon care on a global scale.
It's a real possibility, and it's a conversation worth having, especially as Pokemon continue to play such a big role in our lives.
It makes you think. This reminds us that the world of Pokemon, while amazing and full of adventure, also intersects with real-world problems and complexities.
It absolutely does. And as Pokemon continue to evolve, so will the ways we interact with them and care for them. This case is challenging, for sure, but it could lead to positive change. Make us rethink and refine our approach to Pokemon health and well-being on a global scale.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think that this whole thing might be what pushes us towards a more standardized way of handling Pokemon care around the world.
Yeah, like the Pokemon world is finally growing up, and the legal systems need to catch up.
Exactly. It's like we're seeing the growing pains of a field that's changing so rapidly. Pokemon aren't just for battles and trading anymore. They're part of so many things in our lives now. Companionship, healthcare, you name it. And that level of integration definitely requires clear guidelines and ethical considerations. Speaking of ethics, this whole situation with Professor Oak brings up some interesting questions about the responsibilities of researchers. And what can happen when good intentions go wrong?
Absolutely. Oak is respected, dedicated his life to Pokemon. But even the best intentions can have unintended consequences, especially when you're working in different cultures, different legal systems.
Like the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right. And in this case, those good intentions may have led to a violation of Malaysian law, which, as we've discussed, is a serious matter.
It makes you wonder, did Oak, coming from a different research background, underestimate how important strict licensing is in Malaysia?
It's possible. It highlights how crucial it is to be sensitive to other cultures, understand local laws, especially in specialized fields like Pokemon care.
This brings up something I'm sure a lot of our listeners are thinking. Is being unaware of the law a valid excuse in this kind of situation?
That's a tough one. No easy answer. While it's possible Oak didn't know every detail of Malaysia's licensing rules, legal systems usually work on the idea that ignorance of the law isn't a defense.
So even if Oak didn't mean to break the law, the fact that he did could still have consequences.
Unfortunately, yeah. It shows why due diligence is so important, especially when working internationally. Researchers, trainers, everyone, they need to be proactive, understand, and respect local regulations.
It's like visiting a new country. You wouldn't just assume that your own customs apply everywhere, right? You do some research, try to be respectful of their ways.
Exactly, that's a great comparison. Same with the Pokemon world. We need to get past this idea of a single Pokemon culture and recognize that different regions have different approaches, different laws, different ways of caring for Pokemon.
It's like a call for more cultural exchange, more understanding within the Pokemon community.
Absolutely. And this whole case, with all its drama, might be what finally gets that dialogue going.
This incident has really divided people, hasn't it? Both in Malaysia and internationally. Some see Oak as a victim of circumstance, a researcher who made an honest mistake. Others think he should be held accountable, no matter his intentions.
It's a classic ethical dilemma. On one hand, you have to respect local laws, ensure accountability. On the other hand, there's compassion for someone who might not have fully understood the consequences.
And that's where it gets really tough. How do you balance those things? How do you decide what justice means in this case?
Those are the hard questions, and there are no easy answers. In the end, it'll be up to the Malaysian courts to decide Oak's fate. But no matter what happens, this case has started a crucial conversation about the future of Pokemon care and the responsibilities of those working with Pokemon.
It's a conversation that goes beyond just the legal stuff. It's about our values, our beliefs about the human-Pokemon relationship, and how we handle ethical challenges in a globalized world.
You said it. And I think it's important to acknowledge the emotional side of this, too, especially for those who see Oak as a hero, a pioneer in Pokemon research.
He's more than just a researcher to many people. He's a symbol, of childhood dreams, adventure, the possibilities of the Pokemon world.
Exactly. And to see that figure caught up in this legal mess, facing possible imprisonment, It's upsetting, of course. It challenges how they see him, forces them to face tough questions about accountability and the consequences of actions, even those with good intentions.
It reminds us that even our heroes are human. They make mistakes,
Yeah.
and they're subject to the laws of the societies they live in.
Right, and it emphasizes the need for open and honest conversations about the ethics of Pokemon care and research. We can't just stick to simple narratives. We have to engage with the complexities of a world where science, culture, law, and personal beliefs all intersect.
And then you add Ash and his friends into the mix, another layer of complexity. Loyalty, the limits of protest, individual actions versus the law.
It's amazing how this case has become such a focal point. So many issues. Pokemon care ethics, international relations, and it's all happening on a global stage, amplified by social media and the news.
It's hard to say how it'll all end. But one thing's for sure. This case will change how we think about and interact with Pokemon for years to come.
I completely agree. This is a watershed moment, where the innocence and wonder of the Pokemon world clash with the realities of the human world. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions and face the ethical challenges of a future where Pokemon are increasingly part of our lives.
And those are questions we can't ignore. So what does this mean for the future of Pokemon care? Will this lead to more international collaboration, more standardized regulations? Will this case push us towards a more ethically informed approach to Pokemon research and training?
Excellent questions. And honestly, the answers aren't clear yet. But I do believe this could be a turning point, a moment where we acknowledge that the Pokemon world, it's not just a game, not just a fantasy, it's a reality. And it requires our careful thought, our ethical awareness, our commitment to ensuring the well-being of Pokemon.
It reminds us that even in a world full of Pokemon, humans are still at the center of it all. Our choices, our actions, our values, they shape the world we create. For ourselves and for the Pokemon who share with us.
A world full of possibilities, yes, but also full of challenges. And as we move forward into the unknown future, we need to do so with wisdom, compassion, and a deep respect for the balance between humanity and the natural world, between scientific progress and ethical responsibility.
Yeah, it really is a lot to think about. This whole case has made me see the human-Pokemon relationship differently.
It has, and for you as a Pokemon fan, this might make you question how we balance our passion for Pokemon with our responsibility. Is loyalty a good enough reason to break the law, or do we have to find other ways to advocate for Pokemon, but within the existing legal systems?
Those are some really tough questions. Professor Oak, Ash, this whole thing, it's like a small-scale version of the bigger issues we're facing. As Pokemon become more and more a part of our everyday lives.
Exactly. We have to think about the ethics of it all. Pokemon healthcare, training methods, even battling. The more we learn about Pokemon, the more responsible we have to be towards them.
Well, this has been a true deep dive. We started with a licensing problem and ended up talking about international law, cultural differences, and the ethics of Pokemon care.
It's definitely a story that's still going, and what happens next could have huge consequences for the future of Pokemon and their relationship with us humans.
We'll definitely keep following the story and let you know about any big developments. But in the meantime, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on all of this? Head over to the comments and let us know your perspective.
This whole case shows us that the Pokemon world is changing, and we need to change with it. We need to have these tough conversations, challenge what we think we know, and work together to create a future where both humans and Pokemon can thrive.
Well said. And on that note, thank you all for joining us for this deep dive into the Professor Oak saga. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the AI Shetness YouTube channel for more explorations of the Pokemon world and beyond.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never lose your passion for Pokemon.
We'll see you in the next episode.